Hi, my name is Fearghal Youell. I'm a storyboard artist and animator, and this is my third and final video in a series of tutorials on the animation process. My first video was on character design, in which at the end I drew a bunch of characters based on a random word generator. The video after that was on storyboard art, and I did at the end a storyboard using a bunch of those characters. And now, in between videos, I've created some animation based on the storyboard that I made at the end. Over here, I have the storyboard that I made edited into an animatic. Open that up. So it starts with the gardener. He's walking through the forest, and then the spider. He sees the gardener walking through the forest, lowers down behind the gardener, who realizes something's behind him, and so he turns around to look at what's behind him, and the spider, he greets him, and the gardener freaks out in response to the giant spider. And so I wasn't able to animate the full thing in a week, because that's the first thing you really need to know about animation, is it can take a while, and it's a lot of effort. And I would have loved to animate the full thing, but I just didn't have time for it. Time is a very important resource in animation. So here are the two shots I got to fully animate. First, the gardener walking through the forest, and then the spider opening his eyes and looking at the gardener. And I did that in the main animation program I use, this one here, Toon Boom Harmony. Now, most of you watching this won't be using Toon Boom Harmony anytime soon because it's quite complicated and it costs a fair bit of money to use, but it's the one I'm most familiar with, so it's what I'll be using to show you how animation is generally made. But don't worry, I will be talking about easier to use and, more importantly, free programs you can use later on. The first thing to understand about animation and about filmmaking in general, and I know a lot of you will already know this, but a lot of you are also going to be quite young, so maybe you don't know this yet, is that while it looks like a moving picture, it's actually a bunch of pictures being shown to you really quickly that makes it look like it's moving, because the human eye just isn't good at interpreting a bunch of still images being shown at once. It interprets that as something that's moving. And so... The first thing to understand about animation and about filmmaking in general, and a lot of you will already know this, but I also know that a lot of you watching are quite young, so maybe you don't know this yet, is that while it looks like a moving picture, it's actually a bunch of pictures being shown to you really quickly that makes it look like something's moving, because the human eye just isn't good at interpreting a bunch of similar looking pictures going by really quickly. To the human eye, it looks like something is moving. The usual speed is 24 pictures at once, but it could be as high as 30 or 60 pictures at once. And I say it once, even though it's a second. The first thing to understand about animation and about filmmaking in general, and a lot of you will already know this, but I also know that a lot of you are quite young, so maybe you don't know this yet, is that while it looks like a single moving picture, it's actually a bunch of pictures being shown to you really quickly that make the human eye interpret it as something that's moving, because the human eye just isn't, like, good enough at understanding a bunch of similar pictures being shown at once. And the usual speed is 24 pictures shown in 1 second, but it can also go as high as 30 pictures shown at 1 second, or 60 pictures. But yeah, in the case of animation, those pictures are drawings, and as a child, I found that really hard to understand, because I love to draw, but because I love to draw, I knew how hard it was to draw, so I was like, how could someone draw so many pictures that look similar to make it look like it's moving for up to hours? Because, animated movies, they can go, like, as far as 2 hours, so that must be thousands of drawings, and I didn't know how someone could get that done. And it wasn't until I was in, like, my mid-teens that I understood that that was done through several layers, and mainly just through a bunch of people working together. And that's what I'll be showing you here through the animation of the spider opening his eyes. So if you see these rectangles here, they each represent a different drawing, and this red thing I'm moving across, that decides what drawing I'm currently on. So I move to a different drawing, and up here the drawing changes. Move to this one, different drawing. And so yeah, as this quickly goes across, you can see that all these drawings come together to make it look like something's moving. And it's done through different layers, which I have here. I've closed each section of the animation into a folder, and this is for the eyes. So I'll be showing you what each layer is and does. So first of all, I'll make them all disappear so I can go through them one at a time. So the first one, as you can see here, is the animatic that I did in the last video, which is a storyboard edited together to decide the timing of each shot. And of course, the storyboard starts first, because that's how we decide what's going to be in each shot. And then after the storyboard, we do the rough animation, which I'm going to get rid of the storyboard so we get a better look at the rough animation, which is just a bunch of rough line work so we get the general idea of the animation. We do this first so that we don't have to spend too much time on, clean, concentrated animation that takes a lot of time before we discover any mistakes that we may have to redo. By doing a rough one first, then we can, figure out what works, and it won't have taken us too much time to figure out any mistakes or what works and what doesn't. And then after we have the rough animation done, we do the clean, that's the wrong layer, we do where's the clean? The clean layer! So that goes over the rough animation, and as you may see, it's a lot clearer and a lot more defined. And then after the clean lines are done, then we add the colors. I actually have 2 layers of colors here, and I'll show you why. This first layer is, as you can see, it colors everything in, but the eyes are empty, because I put it over 2 different layers, because it was easier to just have a layer of blue, or it's more of a cyan than a blue. But yeah, that goes behind the eyes, so that the colors are easier to work with. And as you can see, I haven't done the pupils yet, because I did a very special trick with those. Rather than doing a bunch of drawings separately, I had a single layer. I'll get the pupils up now. What did I decide? No, that's for later. Yeah, here are the pupils. And what I actually did is I just did one drawing, and that one drawing I had with these black dots here, if you can see, they all represent a different position I put the eyes in, and then they automatically move to where that position is. It was through this tool here. If I select this layer, I can move the eyes like this, and so by moving them to certain positions across different points, different frames of the animation, then it'll go to those positions, and that does a lot of the work for me. So that's very easy when you have a simple object, like irises, and you need to have them move across different points. That's a lot easier than doing different drawings, for every individual frame. And then finally, we have the shading. There's not much shading to be shown here, but, I still needed to do it as an example. Here's the shading. Here it is removed, here it is added. And that's what gives a character their sort of final level of detail. It's what makes them look three-dimensional. So those are all the layers that go into your average. There may be more layers, maybe less layers, depending on what's involved in the actual animation, but that's generally the layers that will be involved in doing 2D animation. Now that you understand how the layers work, I'll show you some animation techniques to make the animation process easier. So I have the gardener walking across the forest here, and given what I just told you, I'll open up the gardener's layers. That would take several drawings to get him to walk across the whole forest. You can see down here where the drawings are, that would be like, what, 120 drawings? I don't know. But for walking, there's something very simple you can do to get a lot of animation out of not very few drawings, but a lot less drawings than you generally need. And that's called the walk cycle. Because when you're walking, it's always move your right foot forward, move your left foot forward. You only have 2 legs, you only need to move 2 legs. And so we only need to animate those 2 legs moving, and then we just have that on repeat as he goes across. So that's about, I think the average walk cycle takes about like 10 drawings, maybe 8 drawings, but that's all you need to do. Enough drawings to make him move his left foot forward and his right foot forward. And then I just had him, much like the spider's eyes, I just had him placed at one point here and at one point there, and then it causes him to be walking forward by just placing him do different points, and with enough drawings to make him move his left and right foot, and just have that go on repeat. And as you can also see here, I have a much more detailed background, and that's an entirely different subject. Because while I drew the gardener here, I actually drew the background somewhere else, and I just put it in here. As you can see here, these layers, they have different symbols to represent what they are. These are animation layers. This is just a picture layer that I added in, because I drew the background in Fire Alpaca, and put it in here, because that's a lot easier to work with if you just draw a background separately. And I'll show you how I made that background now. So what I have here is a sped up video of when I was drawing the background. That took me about an hour to do, but by speeding it up to 36 times speed, you can see it go over in about a minute. So yeah, I was drawing my clean lines over the storyboard, because the storyboard basically already worked as my rough layer to understand where everything was going to go before I did the cleaner lines that would be used in the final product. And over here, I have my references. Here is a picture of a real forest, and here is a picture of a forest from Snow White, a very old Disney movie. And references are used so that you remember exactly what you're drawing. I mean, you're probably going to remember what you're drawing, but for something like a forest, it really helps to look at a real forest to understand where everything can go, how to layer everything to look like a proper forest, because it can be hard to do that off the top of your head. And as you can see here, after I do my clean lines, I of course started coloring it in. As for using other animation as a reference, that helps to, if you don't really know how other people do it, it can help to look at their work. Of course, as long as you don't copy it directly, that that's just cheating. But if you look at like the techniques they use, like understanding how the shading is done, there's nothing wrong with that. My brother used to make fun of me as a child for using references like that, but it really does help to become as good as other people to see what they do. And then after the color layer is done, the next layer is, of course, shading, which I'll just zoom ahead to that. As soon as the coloring is done, just filling in extra details. Yeah, I started adding shadows as their own layer, and of course shadows make everything look more three-dimensional. And as you can see here, after I finish drawing my background, I just put it into the Harmony program, and yeah, that you just have your animation over nothing, basically, and then after you're done with that, that's where you can put the background to have a fully completed scene. And over here we have the sped up video of when I was drawing the actual walk cycle. And so the two references I have here, unlike with the background, are the most important one is of the character. Because no matter how familiar you are with a character, even if you created the character, it can be hard to remember all the details on them. So you want to keep a reference in the corner of your eye so you can always look at it and remember all the details that are involved when you're drawing the character multiple times. And then here, I have the reference of the actual walk cycle. This is the most common image used to represent the walk cycle, and that's so I remember how the character is going to be moving, what positions the legs will be and the arms will be in every part of the drawing. Another important detail with the walk cycle is the fact that the character will be going up and down as they're walking, so I gotta represent that with every drawing. If you ever notice when you're walking, your legs, when you're stepping your legs outward, your head may lower down because, you're not standing up straight, so your overall height will go down. And then when your legs are, in the middle, then your head will go up. So that's an important detail to remember when doing a walk cycle. And that's the kind of thing you'll remember when you keep a reference of the walk cycle. And that in tandem with the reference to your character, all your drawings will be figured out as long as you're paying attention. And so over here, after I get my line art done, then I start coloring them in. And, over the process there, I start getting the walk cycle figured out. There's the rough legs underneath the colored hands. So the last thing I'll be showing you is something called smear frames. Over here, I have the last shot. I wasn't able to finish animating it. I didn't have time to do that, but it's done in rough animation, so you understand the general gist of what was going to happen. I have the spider here, I have the gardener here, and I have a rough background behind them. And what smear frames are, I'll just show you how the animation plays out in its rough form. Gardener freaks out and struggles to keep his balance, and then stops. Oh no, it is looped back to the start. Can't get rid of the looping option. That doesn't matter. But yeah, as you can see here, when the gardener freaks out and he jumps back, there is one frame where he's all blurry, so that's what's called a smear frame. And smear frames are a very handy tool in animating, because you may notice, say, if you wave your arm in front of you really fast, you'll see that it becomes a bit of a blur, and that's what's represented through these kinds of frames. And they really add more personality to the way things move. If I was just drawing the character as like really defined and always detailed, never blurry, it would look a bit boring. These smear frames, they add more personality to the movement and a lot more energy to them. And they also make animating just a fair bit easier. When you have a character moving like this, it's easier to draw, and it also does the double duty of making it more energetic. So it's a very effective tool when you want a character moving around really fast. So now that you understand how animation works and is done, I can show you how you can do some animation yourself, or at least point you in the direction of where you can get started. So the two animation programs I'm most familiar with outside of Harmony are OpenToonz and FlipaClip, both of which are free. OpenToonz, for the younger ones amongst you, I would not recommend it. It'll probably be too complicated for you. It's a lot like Harmony, which, similarly I would say is too complicated for the younger ones. But if anyone wants to try the more complicated stuff, they can try out OpenToonz. I don't have time to get into detail on exactly how to use it. You'll really have to figure that out yourself. FlipaClip, on the other hand, it's a lot easier to get. It is an app on phones and iPads and such, and it'll be a lot easier for you to use. And here I'll be showing you exactly where to get started on FlipaClip. Now, unlike the stuff on my computer, I can't record the stuff on my phone, so I'll only be showing you through screenshots I took on my phone, but hopefully you'll be able to understand. So the first screen you'll be greeted with when you start an animation on FlipaClip is this one here, and the first thing you'll want to do is name your animation. You can name it whatever you want, of course. And after that, there's things like output size and format. You probably don't know what that is, but you don't need to. It's already set to exactly the kind of details you want, so you don't have to worry about that. And then afterwards, you can just select Make Your Movie. And after you've done that, the next screen you'll be greeted with is this one here, where you decide what frames, how many frames a second your animation will be going at, which is how many drawings will be shown in 1 second to sort of determine the speed of your animation. And it's already set to 12 whenever you start, and 12, that's plenty fine. That will get you a good, smooth-looking animation. And after that is when you can actually start your drawing, doing your multiple drawings. So here I have the example ball I drew, and up here is where you'll find your tools, like your pen, your the size of your pen, and the color of your pen. You'll also, I don't have them shown here, but if you like click this back button here, then you'll be able to select other things like your eraser or your ruler or whatever you need to get your drawing done. You'll find that all up here, and if you can't find them, generally just selecting this pink back button here will let you find the rest. And down here, we have the actual, different frames. So if you move across this, that'll be your different drawings from, which you can get everything moving. And what's also quite important is this one here, which is your layers. And I have a more expanded layer option here. So yeah, clicking or pressing this one, that'll get you to this screen. Well, specifically, it'll get this thing open, and that's all your different layers. So, for example, here, I was drawing the ball, the black line here, that was this layer up here, and then the layer beneath it was the green behind the black line. So, yeah, that's how you get your, your colors behind your lines. And then another thing to show is just when you open up your colors, you're greeted by this wheel here, and you can just select whatever color you want for when you're doing your colors. And that's all the basics of FlipaClip. There's more to understand, but that's the basics you need to know. The rest you can figure out on yourself. Here I have the ball animation I was doing in the guide of FlipaClip I was showing you. There's the ball going up and down. And yeah, you can see the clean line and the green color layer behind it, and a little bit of shadow down here. Something you can also see, as well as the smear frame technique I was showing you earlier, there's also a technique called squash and stretch, where when the ball hits the ground, it squashes down, to sort of represent the momentum. And you can do this with things, other things like characters when they're moving. Say, if a character is jumping up and down, maybe when they hit the ground, they'll squash down into a flatter and wider shape before they jump, and maybe they'll become a taller and thinner shape. And it's not exactly realistic, but it puts a lot more energy into their motion. But a problem I have with FlipaClip when drawing the normal way is that you're doing it with your finger, and your finger can get in the way of what you're drawing, so you don't exactly know what you're drawing. And you kind of see that here, where it's a lot messier than the drawings of mine that I've been showing you before. And a way you can fix that is by, rather than drawing in FlipaClip, you can just send pictures into it, and you can send pictures of just physical drawings you've made. So over here, I did some drawings of, I took a piece of paper, and I split it into 8 different sections, so I had 1 line down the middle, and 3 lines across, and that caused it, to split into 8, and in the middle of each of those, there's a different drawing of a frame of the Chip Man in a walk cycle. And so then I took a picture of each of these squares, I took my phone, and I brought them close enough to take individual pictures. I made sure that these lines weren't visible in the actual phone, because that way I'm purely taking a picture of each of these squares. And then I put that into FlipaClip, and I have the video here, and voila! And it looks quite nice. So that's how you can make a physical animation in FlipaClip as opposed to drawing directly in the program. And so now, after all this, you should be able to fully understand how the animation process works. After you have your character design figured out, and your designs for everything else that'll be involved in your animation, and you have your storyboard figuring out how everything's going to move and where everything's going to be, then you should understand to start with your rough animation, then your clean animation, then coloring everything in, and using techniques like walk cycles to, make certain animations easier, and using things like squash and stretch and smear frames to make your animations as expressive and as energetic as you want them to be. Thank you for watching this video on animation techniques, and if you've been watching all 3 tutorials, thank you for doing that. If you haven't watched all 3 tutorials, part 1 is on character design and part 2 is on storyboards, so check those out if either of those topics interest you. If you want to check out more art content in general, then you can follow the South Tipp Arts Centre on YouTube, Twitter, or Instagram. Goodbye!